This meeting is being recorded.
Welcome everybody to our author chat for the Blue STEM Award with Jen Bryant, author of Elgin Baylor, Above the Rim, How Elgin Baylor Changed Basketball. We are so happy to have you here with us today. And we'd like to welcome Ms. Sanchez's class from Greenbrier Elementary. I'm Heidi Knuth. I am chair of the Blue STEM Committee, and we are looking forward to a wonderful time talking to Mrs. Bryant and asking all of our questions, just to let the kids know how this is going to work. Like normal, we will be asking 2 questions at a time and taking turns when our other class needs a turn. So Ms. Sanchez, if you'd like to have your first 2 kids come up with their questions. And thank you very, very much for being here with us today. And a huge thank you to Jen Bryant for joining us.
We are so excited to be here. This is our biggest crowd we've had yet, so.
Great.
All right. Go ahead, number 1.
Hi, my name is Violet, and how did you first learn about Elgin Baylor, and how did you decide to write a book about him?
That's great. Thank you, Violet. Well, this book actually started, as many of my books do, by something very small. I really like to share with you all that out in the world every day, we are always surrounded by ideas, right? There are 1,000 things you could write about every day. And so how do you choose that idea that you're going to stick with long enough to make a book about it? That's a really excellent question by Violet. In this particular case, most writers also read a lot. And I was always a very active kid. I liked to play sports when I grew up. I grew up with 1 brother and 2 male cousins. So we were always outside playing sports. And so I like to read biographies about athletes. I was reading a biography of an athlete named Dr. Julius Erving, Dr. J. He was an NBA player in Philadelphia, which is near where I live. And in that book, he was remembering in the first chapter about when he was a child and he was playing football, catch football with his neighbors. And he fell and he really messed up his leg. I mean, he broke his leg really badly. So he was in a cast from his ankle all the way up to his waist, and he couldn't move. So all he could do was lay on the couch and watch television, which for a few hours is nice, right? Maybe even a day, but weeks on end, it's terrible. But what he did is that he said, during that time, I was thinking, oh my gosh, what if I never play sports again? And my favorite sport is basketball. I want to be a pro NBA player. I want to be an athlete. And while he was on that couch lying down with that cast, he saw an NBA game, and in that game played Elgin Baylor. And while he was watching the game on the screen, all the players were going back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, just like a ping pong game, right? Flat. Elgin Baylor was doing this, up and down, spinning both hands over his back, dunking. And he said, that's what I'm going to do. If I can heal my leg, I'm going to grow up and I'm going to play above the rim like Elgin Baylor. And so I'm reading this book and I'm thinking, wow, this one few minutes of TV really changed this whole person's life. And if you know anything about basketball, Dr. J, Julius Erving, became one of the greatest players above the rim in NBA history. So I said, I kind of remember hearing something about Elgin Baylor. Let me read more about him. Let me do some more research. And so that just reading about Elgin Baylor in this other book got me started. And that's often how my books start, is just by something small that I read. Sometimes I go to a museum and see a painting and that will start my research. Sometimes I hear something on the radio or something that someone says. So that's a really great question. Thanks, Violet.
Hi, my name is Maddie. And
Hi,
is there anything that you didn't put in this book that you would like to share with us?
Another great question. There are always things that authors and illustrators, I think, find out about the person they're writing about in a biography and it doesn't fit, right? So part of the definition of a picture book biography is that there's text, and the text is supposed to be really tight and beautiful like poetry, that's my job. And if you look at the wonderful things that Frank Morrison does, his art, these paintings are just fabulous, right? I mean, they're just great. But what that means is you can't write, 1,000 words on every page. So you have to pick and choose, what you put in and what you leave out. So yes, there was an actually really tough part of his life growing up. As you can imagine, he was in segregated Washington, D.C., where if you were a Black child, you were separate from the white children. And his sister was being picked on by someone else in her class. And a policeman saw it, and he brought Elgin's sister home to the father and said, your daughter hit this other girl. And everyone said, hey, but she only hit her because the other girl hit her first, but the other girl was white. And so the policeman took the white girl's side, and he brought Elgin's sister home, and he said, you have to punish her while I'm standing here, or else I'm not gonna, or I'll do it myself. So there was just that was a terrible thing, right? First of all, I didn't want to put that necessarily in the book because it didn't really flow along with the rest of the story. But to answer your question, Maddie, yes, there are often things that we find out both good and bad and just interesting about the person that doesn't fit in the book. And that was one of them, because it made me understand how important it was for Elgin to change the way people are treated. I mean, this is a story about racism, but in a larger sense, I think everyone here that's on this call, there'll be a time in your life when someone makes you feel really small, right? They pick on you, or they accuse you of doing something you really didn't do, or they make you feel less than as a person. And that's really what this story is about. And Elgin had the courage to say, hey, you know what? You're not going to do that to me anymore. I am a person, and I have the same value as any other human being, and the way you're treating me is not right. So that's the central idea of the story. It's a great question, Maddie. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Hi, my name's Parker. Do you get to pick your illustrator?
That's another good question. So it's kind of a complicated answer. In this case, for this book, yes. But what you have to remember is I have written many, many other books. I mean, like lots and lots of books. This is about a quarter of them. So because I have experience as a writer, and because I know a lot of illustrators, the person who brings us together is the editor. And the editor, in this case, asked me, for this story, who would you suggest to be the artist? And I had a short list of people who I thought could do a great job on this book. And at the top of that list was Frank Morrison. So in this case, I did get to say to the editor, I would love for Frank Morrison to illustrate this. And fortunately, he was able to do it. Here's an interesting thing, you guys, though, but kind of think of an author and an illustrator much like an actor who's making a movie. If you watch a movie today, that movie was made 2 years ago, and that actor is already doing maybe 1, 2, 3 more movies. Authors and illustrators also sign up for projects, 1, 2, 3 of them at a time. So it would have been possible that I said, hey, I want Frank Morrison to do this book, and he wouldn't have been able to do it because he was too busy. And that happens sometimes, but I got lucky. Frank Morrison was able to do this book. So For a new author, I will say, Parker, that's a very interesting question. If I was a brand new author, I don't get to pick my illustrator. All right, so if you guys end up to write children's books or any kind of book, your first book, you usually probably won't get to pick your own author, your own illustrator. That's a good question. Thank you. Excuse me, I have a cold, so every once in a while I'm going to take a drink.
Hi, I'm Caroline. And I'm Elston.
Hi.
How long did it take to write this book?
Everyone always asks that. And you know what's funny? I really don't keep track of it very much because I'm usually overlapping my projects. But the writing of this book, from the first time I took the first research notes until the end, when the editor and I agreed that the writing was finished, was about 1 year. About 1 year, which is interesting, isn't it? Because, you know, when you look at the pages, you think, oh, geez, there's not that many pages in it. But what you have to remember is that the book generally starts out to be much, much longer. And then we cut down and cut down and cut down and throw things out. And then we make things a little sharper. So it's kind of like making a movie in a sense, you know, where if you had a camera and you got to run the film and then you said, let's do it again and let's do it again. That's kind of what writing is like too. So I think I had about 15 rough drafts of this book, if you can imagine that, right? So when you guys do writing, maybe you have a rough draft and then a final copy. I had about 15 rough drafts. So it took me a year. It's a great question. Some books take longer, some shorter.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Good question.
Hi, my name is William. Can you tell us about your writing process?
Yes. I will say that I'm not someone who really is helped by an outline. I understand why people use outlines, and some of my very good writer friends who have books in your library, right behind you, I see a lot of good books. A lot of those writers will use outlines. I don't really use outlines. What I try and do is I try and use images. So there's almost like a little movie in my head. And many, many times I don't even start at the beginning of the person's life. I will start wherever I feel the most emotion about that person. And for me, for Elgin Baylor, it was that night that he sat down at the game and refused to play. So I did a lot of research about that, and I actually wrote that part first. And then I went back and researched his childhood. He actually did some audio recordings like we're doing now. We're recording this interview. There, at the Library of Congress, there's a great audio recording of Elgin Baylor talking about his childhood and how they used to sneak under the fence, all that kind of stuff, use a volleyball, and all of that. But I actually did that part second. So my writing process, I guess the main thing you can remember is it's not what you would call linear or sequential. I don't always do the beginning first. Sometimes I start in the middle because that's the part that to me is most interesting, or that's the part that I know the most about. And then I kind of build out from there. So if you do any mapping, do you do any story mapping, anything like that? It's more like that. It's much more of a circle rather than 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Now, having said that, if some of you out there prefer to do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, you know, I'm going to start at the beginning when he was young, then I'm going to talk about this, and you like to write that all down first, that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. It's that for me, that doesn't work very well. So I'm more an emotional writer, and I like to start from where it means the most to me. Okay? Yeah, thank you, William. That was a great question.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Hannah, and did you always want to be a writer? If not, when did you decide to give it a try?
That is a good question. Yes. Well, I actually thought I was going to be a veterinarian because I love animals, and I still ride horses. Tomorrow morning, I'm going to go ride horses, and I love being in a barn because there's always dogs and cats and everything around. I'm a big bird watcher. So I mean, that was always a part of who I was. And I thought I wanted to go to veterinary school and be a veterinarian. One of my favorite books growing up was The Black Stallion. I think those books are still around. Yeah, it was a whole series, right? About a boy who was shipwrecked on an island, and he tames this black stallion and brings him back to civilization, right, in New York. It's fun. But what I decided is that I really loved words, and I really loved telling stories. And I didn't get to do that very much in science class. I'm very interested in science, but I didn't necessarily like all the measuring and the beakers and the stuff that you had to do in school science. So what I did actually, is kind of a two-part answer, is when I went to college, I actually majored in French and German. Isn't that interesting? I didn't major in writing. So I did not go to school for writing, but I had to read in different languages. And I think what that helped me do is to understand that words are kind of like clay, that you can kind of play with them a little bit. And I think learning another language really helped me in that. So if anybody of you in the room speak another language at home or study another language, it's very helpful to your writing. Yeah, it's a great question. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is
Hi.
Blake. And what will your next book be about?
Ooh. Well, let's see. My next book is actually, it was delayed a little bit because the publisher had to move some things around because of COVID. Some things were delayed. So it's a little early. I can't really tell about it, but my most recent book was about a woman named Patsy Mink. I don't know if any of you have seen this book, but she was the first woman of color in Congress, and she was from Hawaii. And she helped to write a very important law called Title IX. And if any of you girls play sports in school, that was the law that allowed girls to have funding for sports teams just like boys. Because when I was growing up, it was mostly the boys, and we didn't get very much money to have sports teams. But she changed that. So that was the most recent book. The next book is going to be about a woman who's a scientist, and that's pretty much all I can tell you right now until it's a little bit more done. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks. Hang on one second. I'm gonna blow my nose.
Please come on over so you can be ready.
Okay, thanks.
Hi, my name is May. What do you like doing when you're not writing or researching?
Well, I think I just mentioned to you that I like being around animals, right? So I like to go horseback riding. I do love to read at night. I'm not a big TV person. So when my husband's watching TV, he likes to watch sports on TV. I will do a lot of readings. I read fiction because that's different than the books that I write. I love to visit museums. We also have a great state park near where we are, and I like to be outside, and over there's a big lake. You can watch birds, you can take boats out. I like to just walk around there a lot also. I also love to swim, and right now I have a cold, so that's not going to happen, but yeah, I like to swim and also like to bike ride. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Hi, my name is Dylan. Where is your favorite place to ride?
My favorite book to write?
No, your favorite place to write.
Oh, my favorite place to write. I will tell you that I did a lot of books, and I like, see all these picture books and biographies. So 2 places really. One is that, you know, that state park that I just mentioned is close to me. When my daughter was in school and about your age, I used to drive over there in my car and just park and look at the lake because it was really nice to look at. And I would work in my car. And that did a great thing for me. You know, when you're in your car, it's kind of like a little box. And you don't have to get out unless, you know, something important is happening around you. And there was really nothing else to do but write. So it made me focus. And so it was like my own little office, right? But it was outside. And I also work in my own public library. I have a really great public library, only 2 miles from here. And it's next to a development where I can just go and walk, you know, at lunchtime and take a break and then come back to the library. And of course, the library is where I do a lot of research. So they have nice big tables. It's great. So my public library and my car are the 2 places I like to write the most. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
I think we have a few more questions.
Sure, I'm game.
Hi, my name
Hi.
is Sasha, and what was your favorite author when you were a kid, and have you written any chapter books?
Any chapter books? Well, my favorite author when I was a kid, so I loved horses, right? I mentioned that, I still do. Marguerite Henry was an author. She wrote Misty of Chincoteague, which was a very famous horse book when I was growing up. And I also liked Maurice Sendak, Where the Wild Things Are. He was one of my favorite authors. And I also liked Walter Farley because he wrote all those Black Stallion books. Yeah, so when I got a little bit older, those were like chapter book novels. Those are my favorite writers. When I was really young, I liked Dr. Seuss. I really loved Dr. Seuss. I love all that rhyming stuff. Yeah, loved it. Chapter books. So I have written, I will show you 2 that you guys could read, I'm sure. Aside from biographies, I write novels that are about historical events. This is this is a real trial that happened in the hometown where I grew up in New Jersey. And it's written in poetry, but it's more like a chapter book really than a novel because it has a lot of white space and the poems are, you know, they all have a title and then you go on to the next one. So that's a chapter book. And I also wrote this book, which is a girl's diary. She's trying to become an artist. And as you can see, also really not your usual novel format. It's more of a novel in verse or a long chapter book. All right, so those are 2 that I think would probably fit your description. Yeah, those are good questions. Thank you. I like your hat. What does it say?
D20 music. The G stands for just.
Oh, good for you. I like it.
And I do play the violin, and I am in the school choir.
Oh, good for you. Music is great. Good for you.
I think we just have one more, and then
Okay.
your time is probably up anyway, so this should be perfect. Okay, so
Okay.
What is the first book you've ever written?
The very, very first book I ever wrote, let's see, I don't have a copy here. So when my daughter now is 34 and she has 2 little boys, so I'm a grandma. But when she was little, I wrote a series of books about working mothers because I had been a teacher. And then I had a baby and I was becoming a writer. And so that was a question in my mind. Remember, I told you I'm a writer that goes a lot more by emotion than by like an outline. So I was thinking about this question, you know, how do you have a family and then also have a job? And so I kind of explored that and I did a series of books called Working Moms. And the first one that I wrote was actually about a park ranger over at that state park that I mentioned, remember, with the lake and stuff? So there was a woman over there when I would see when I was like, I used to write poems and stuff over there, and she had 2 kids. And so I ended up making her part of a series of this, and we took pictures. I had a friend who was also a mom, and she took her camera over there, and the books have photographs in them. So not paintings like Frank did for this beautiful book, but it was kind of a day in the life of a working mom. And we did 6 different women with different jobs. One was a pediatrician. One was a lawyer. Another one was a play director, you know, like a dramatist. And this woman was a park ranger, which is, you know, pretty cool job. So those are the first books I ever wrote. It was like a biography, but it was a little bit different because I had photographs. Yeah, it's a long time ago.
Thank you.
Thank you. Interesting questions, you guys.
Thank you so much for taking the time to answer these questions and doing part of your day to help us with this. We love your books so much.
Oh, thank you. Thank you guys. Thank you so much. Hey, thank you guys so much. It's so much fun. Thank you. Thanks for reading about Elgin, and thank you for having me on your Illinois list. I really enjoyed talking with you all. See ya.
Those were fantastic questions. Good job, you guys.
Great, you
Thank you so much.
Really good. Thanks.
Can we take
Thank
a
you, Ms.
picture?
Sanchez.
Can we take a picture real quick with you on the screen?
Yeah.
All right, if you want to get in the picture, come on up here. I'll mute it so it doesn't make you crazy, but thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. The questions were awesome. Oh my gosh, you guys are great.